Welcome to episode 424 of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Jacob Tipper. This is perhaps a slightly different type of interview, as we will be discussing Jacob's personal experience of coming into triathlon from an elite cycling background. Although, as he will explain, he did do triathlon in his youth. But we will discuss learnings he has taken from this transition from elite road cycling and track cycling into triathlon. And one of the objectives with this type of interview is to explore both similarities and differences between training as a single sport cyclist in this example. But in the future, I hope to do similar type of episodes with single sport swimmers turning into triathletes, single sport runners turning into triathletes, and so on to get a bit of a comparison of what's similar, but also what is different. My hope is that I can get some good guests lined up for similar episodes in the other disciplines of triathlon. But for now, let's start with cycling with Jacob Tipper. Before we get into the interview, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Fuel and Hydration. They help athletes personalize their hydration and fueling strategies for training and racing. Use the free fuel and hydration planner to get a personalized plan for your carbohydrate, sodium, and fluid intake in your next event. And if you want even more help, why not book a free 20-minute video consultation to chat through your plan with the athlete support team? As a TTS listener, you get 15% off your first order by using the code TTS24 on precisionfuelandhydration.com. And thank you to Sonate. The Sonate indoor swim trainer allows you to improve your technique, power, and swim training consistency. You can target and isolate specific aspects of your stroke, like your catch or your pull-through. And the design of the bench forces you to constantly work on core activation, which can help your body position in the water. And most importantly, you can stay consistent in your training even when you don't have time to go to the pool. Try the Sonate risk-free for up to 30 days and get 20% off your first order on sonateswimtrainer.com/TTS. Now, without any further ado, here's the interview with Jacob Tipper. Welcome back to That Triathlon Show, Jacob. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
So how was your run this morning? You told me that you were going to tell me about it on air, so let's start with that.
I don't want to open up with a pretty bang average run, but no, I was just saying that running's finally starting to improve, and it's definitely good for headspace, seeing that the effort you're putting in is finally starting to pay off, because I spent quite a bit of time, still quite a bit of time training and not really getting that much faster, which was disappointing at times. But good run. Just having a chance to look on Strava to see if I wouldn't have got a com, but to see if I've moved up the leaderboard in the segments I was going for a little bit. So yeah, all good. Nice way to start a morning, and it's actually sunny here and not raining and not icy, which is a big improvement for the UK compared to recently.
Excellent. So probably most listeners will be familiar with you because you've been on in the not too distant past. But for those that may be newer, can you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Jacob Tipper. I'm a former elite cyclist, not proper pro. Kind of raced lower level UCI racing, but I did win a few of them. So got wins in Tour Qinghai Lake, which is a pro race in China, the highest altitude stage race in the world. Stage of Tour Morocco, and then I raced on the track. I was one of the founding members of the Who Watt Bike track team, or formerly it was started up as a team KGF. I was one of the founders with Dan Bigham there. And my background from a science perspective is I've got a degree in sports science and studied at master's level. And then, applied that into coaching, some of the athletes I've coached include, worked with Dan up to his hour record. I'm the coach of Ben Healy, who won stages of the Giro last year and stages of, and has been up there in the Ardennes Classics in the last 12 months. So he's had a really, really good last couple of years. And then I worked with some pro triathletes, including Lucy Byram, who had a fantastic result, sitting fourth at the USA Open, the PTO race there, and I work with Johnny Brownlee for his bike-specific stuff. And then as part of other plates that I spin, I also work for Hoob Design, where I'm head of cycling, but I also work from an R&D perspective there. So I've helped with the development of Cat Matthews and Annie Haug suits and some aero testing for Alistair Brownlee, and I work towards Alistair's sub-7 attempt that then obviously became Joe Skipper's sub-7 attempt. So I was the team leader in terms of leading the cyclists and the DS for the cyclists for that specific event.
Yeah, and that's a topic that we went in depth into on one of the past episodes. So I'll put the link to that in the show notes for people that haven't heard that yet. And I guess the reason or the context for this interview is to discuss your own switch from elite level cycling to age group level triathlon. Can you tell us more about that background and your journey into triathlon?
Yeah, so I was. It's easy to say this, but I feel that I was on for probably my best couple of years in cycling with COVID. The year that COVID started and that the lockdowns happened that March, I was second in the UK rankings. I'd won 3 races in the first month of the season. I'd not even started really super high intensity work, but I was, for the first ever time, I was like attacking on climbs on team camp and stuff, and I was really, I'm pretty sure I was on for a good season. It was pretty devastating that when I'd been quite down towards the end of What Bike, to be completely honest, because I wasn't good enough to be on that team. The level was just so elite. And I just wasn't, I was good, but just not that, just a bit it wasn't my strength pursuing specifically, and I wasn't quite good enough. So that was a little bit not great for my headspace as well, kind of coming down from that. So I was really proud that I'd kind of picked myself up. I'd had a great experience there, but as things had kind of turned a little bit sour for me, I'd picked myself up, got back into what I really liked, which was the road. Was on for a good year, and then COVID happened, so I was pretty naff. I did a triathlon at the end of that year just for something to do, and I enjoyed it and went well. And I thought, this is something I may fancy a bit more going forward. But then the next year, I was like, right. That seemed like that could have been my year, but if that was going to be my year, there's no reason why the next year wouldn't have been as good. So again, I put a really big winter in. When we had second lockdown, I deliberately got myself stuck over in Spain so I could train well. Again, power numbers were great. Everything was looking really positive. And then in the UK, we kind of had lockdown number 2. Racing wasn't going to start again, and I just really lost my head. I'd spent 2 years training, having super hard winters, really trying to get my act together with combining work and relationships and everything, and felt I'd really put it in and then not got anything from it, and found that really hard, and it kind of definitely took a lot of love away from cycling. But being the kind of individual that gets to any of that sort of level of sport, you've got a kind of you're a bit of a weirdo. You've got this itch to be doing something. So I'd done triathlon as a kid. It was that was the sport that I actually started with before cycling. For me, that was something I'd always wanted to try and go back to and have a bit of a go at. So I think it was September 2021 that would have been, or like October 2021, basically when I started back. The kind of normal winter training. I thought I'll combine triathlon and I'll still keep my road cycling going for one more year as a bit of a transitional year, albeit I didn't really end up doing that much road cycling that year, and then started age group triathlon from there. And I learned a lot of hard truths along the way, that I was not quite as good a runner as when I was a kid, and that triathlon was quite a hard sport to balance. And my idea of a little bit of it was that as work was getting busier, was I ever going to be able to get back to cycling with the level I could maybe have been, and it was getting more and more difficult to balance it. So for some reason in my head, I was like, oh well, if I'm doing triathlon and I'm not taking it quite so seriously, it doesn't matter that I'm not doing as many hours, etc. But obviously, it turns out that to do triathlon even semi-seriously does require a lot of hours. It was quite difficult, and I learned the hard way of how to balance all those different things. But it's been a lot of learnings, a lot of mistakes, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today. The transition from everyone comes into this from a different point of view. That you may come in triathlon from never doing any exercise before. You may have been a footballer, you may have been a swimmer, you may have been a runner. I've obviously come in from cycling, and I think there's some learning points of what it's like to come in from with my kind of physiology and how that kind of came into the sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and for the listeners, my idea is to do these kinds of episodes also with people coming into triathlon from a swimming background and from a running background, to get those sorts of just case studies as well. But about your background when doing triathlon as a kid, just briefly, for how long did you do it and at what age? 11 till 16 maybe.
I just joined the local Black Country Triathlon club. And to be honest, I wasn't great. I was very enthusiastic as a kid at sport, but I wasn't very good. I kind of only started to get good at sport, to be honest, once I got into my early 20s. Even when I made the switch to cycling, I wasn't very good at cycling. But yeah, I wasn't fantastic as a kid. I suppose by 16, I was actually all right. I was, I think that my best result was 7th in the national, the national champs. I think like a couple of people didn't always go to it because it was like you represented your region. So Rhys Davey, who's head of the Leeds Centre, I think he's rolling with British Triathlon. Works for British Triathlon anyway. He was my age group and he didn't do it, for example. So I was probably more like 10th, 11th, 12th best in my age group. But again, back then there wasn't that much depth. So I was a solid runner. I was probably running. In theory, I ran a 16-minute 5K, but I look back and I think that course was definitely very short. I was probably a 17.5-minute 5K runner. I was not a very good swimmer. Again, I look back at my 400-meter swim PB and I think, I reckon I actually did 2 lengths less there in that triathlon. I don't think that's legitimate. So I was probably swimming about 6:20, 400 meters, and then I was okay on the bike for my age. So I was all right, but I was nothing special. I would have beat, obviously Tom Bishop, I'm assuming people are familiar with. I would have beaten his brother Dave at the national champs, but Dave did a lap less on the run as well, the cheeky boy. So I still bring that up with him, and I still see his mum every now and then, and I call her out on the fact that she let her son do a lap less on the run and cheated. But Dave, who's Tom's brother, actually works for me at Hoop Design as well. But he's a substantially better runner than me now. He runs like a sub 2:20 marathon.
Yeah. No, but that's good to understand a bit the background. And so you've done the 2 full seasons in triathlon, 2022 and 2023, I guess. And when you made that, or when you first got into it with the goal of doing it alongside road cycling for the first season, what were your goals? Did you have any goals or expectations for what you would do and wanted to do in triathlon, short, mid, and long term?
I definitely expect to be better. I'll be honest, in a very obviously deluded way, I thought I'd be a little bit better, and I wasn't, which was sort of frustrating. But that's my own fault. I set myself up for failure there. I went through I did a park run in 2014 after not running at that point there. So I'd have been, I don't know, maybe 6 years, 7 years I'd not ran. And I ran about an 18:10 park run, 18:15 park run. So I assumed that's where I was going to start back runability. I assumed, I'd not run in 6 years back in 2014. So another 6 years I didn't think would make any difference. I assumed my base level of run fitness, whether, when you've combined that with run as a kid, got a good engine of cycling, would be that I'd be an 18-minute 5K runner. It turned out I was not anymore. I was now a 21-minute 5K runner, and I struggled to do 20, and I could struggle to do 5K without picking up a niggle or an injury for the first couple of months. So I started a lot further back than I anticipated, and then just progression I found harder than expected, and I think I probably approached bits of training the wrong way and haven't played to my strengths a little bit. And yeah, like I wouldn't ever say I wanted to go pro with it. It'd have been nice, but I was very a small amount of me was like, don't be deluded, don't be stupid. Just because it's quite arrogant to think that I could go pro at different sport, like especially when I'd not got a swim background or wasn't anything special. It'd be quite arrogant to think that I could do that, but that doesn't stop a small little 1% of you thinking, maybe I could. Even if I can't turn pro, I thought maybe just, I'd like to be on the heels of a couple of pros that maybe are like they're borderline being pros themselves, to be honest. But yeah, it turns out that the guys that are the lower level pros are still absolutely phenomenal athletes, and are still training 25, 30 hours a week, and are actually very you might not really spot them on the PTO rankings, and then you might not know the names, but they're bloody good athletes, basically. And I probably didn't respect that enough. So yeah, I was kind of thinking that I might be able to give them a run for their money, but no, it turns out I'm still not bad at triathlon, but yeah, just not the level I thought I was going to be for various reasons.
What was your swimming level when you started swimming again?
So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't awful considering. I like I said, swimming was what I was really bad at as a kid. So when I was doing that national champs, I was give or take last out the water, but it was non-drafting, so I could kind of catch back on the bike back then. And again, the depth wasn't that high really for youth kids triathlon in 2007. The depth wasn't what it was now. So yeah, like I kind of started about where I was, to be completely honest. I wasn't that far behind swimming wise. Again, with all things, like I actually reckon the pool I started swimming in is actually a little bit short, because I look back now and I think, oh, I was actually quite quick at the start, and then I'd go to different pools and be slower and thinking I was having a bad day. And I actually reckon my very local, not so great pool is actually a little bit short. So I don't know exactly where I was, but it didn't take me that long to be at 6 minutes of 400 meters again. The big thing, to be honest, was in the nicest possible sense, I don't really feel I was coached as a kid for swimming. I didn't really get any support. The people in charge of the West Midlands Academy at the time, even though I was, other than Reese, I was the second best kid in the region for my age group, they weren't interested, because I couldn't swim. They weren't interested in me because they were only interested in swimmers. I understand if you're not getting out the front pack, in professional triathlon, then it's an issue, and I was a long, long way off that. But no one made an attempt to try and see if I could get there. I don't think anyone respected how little I knew about technique as a kid, so I was literally just splashing. So I just watched a few videos on online. There's like a 5-day pull challenge, and honestly, that made such a big difference to me. Just literally learning, where do I put my hands in the water? How do I try and grab the water and kind of push it behind me? And that made a huge difference. So yeah, it didn't take that long till I was sub 6 minutes 400 meters. But obviously after that point there, it's a big gap to get a lot faster, I think. And I think you have to put a lot of work in. And again, I've probably made some mistakes with that approach as well.
Okay, so you have alluded to some mistakes, and you can also phrase that as learnings, I think. But I'm jumping a bit in the questions, but maybe we start there, because then we can start with that point. What do you think that in these years that you have now spent in triathlon, what are the biggest learnings that you made? Some mistakes that you would change if you could go back, and so on.
I think, so me and Michael discussed before this, in terms of, we don't want to make this sound like this is just me ripping my training or just being super negative. I just think there's loads of learnings to be had from potentially making mistakes, and there's just so many different ways of approaching anyone's, coming into the sport, and ways of doing things. I also had a rant to him before that, I get a bit sick of kind of some of the podcast and Twitter gurus that give out the idea that there's a very one set way of doing it. They can be super one dimensional in terms of saying everyone needs to be polarized, or everyone needs to be doing this or that. And ultimately, there's just so many different fits for different people, depending on what your life gives you and where you start from. To give clarity, giving clarity, the things I'll be discussing are mistakes that are the mistakes of a 78 kilo former sprint cyclist with a solid VO2 max kind of coming into this. This isn't necessarily like a mistake that may have been a mistake for me, might not be a mistake for one of the listeners. I might be saying X type training method was awful for me. That doesn't mean it'd be awful for you. It's just, we're just taught, like the expression is everyone is coming into, you never walk into the same stream twice. So, are we very much talking of the context that I am in myself, not necessarily the situation that you, the listener, are in, or if that makes sense, or another triathlete's in, or someone that I coach is in. So in terms of my approach, and I think how I've kind of got it wrong, I think bits of it wrong. We'll see. We'll see if now I've changed my approach, I'll get better this year or not. So I could be talking a little bit prematurely. It could have turned out I got to my ceiling last year. I think the big one. There's a few. I'll go through each sport. So swimming, I think. I think I was lucky in terms of, I got to a decent critical swim speed pretty much straight away. I think I'm probably about 134, 135 right as we speak right now, after not swimming a lot in the last 3-4 months. That's obviously super solid. Like, it's, for a lot of people, that's really good. If you're a pro, then obviously you've got issues, but I'm not trying to be a pro. So, if you look into, what is that costing you over a full Ironman, which is, I haven't actually done an Ironman yet. I've been in halves, but I'm going to go for an Ironman next year. If I was to improve that by 4 seconds, which would take a lot of work, and then assume that 4 seconds is equally worth 4 seconds over an Ironman as well. Like, not that you swim at CSS, but assume that you swim 4 seconds below your CSS or 2 seconds below your CSS for an Ironman swim. Whatever you decide is the right kind of pace for you. That 4 second improvements per 100 isn't worth a lot over a full Ironman. It's 3-4 minutes. I just think, is it worth worrying about? And I think last year, when, under the context of I was trying to I had a lot on my plate. I've got, with work and other things going on. I mean, not as much, again, that's how I felt. There's definitely people here that, again, listening that work, have much harder jobs in terms of having to commute and have kids to look after as well. Like I can be flexible with my work hours being a coach. I can work from home. So but even then I still found, with swimming, it was just a very inefficient use of time was the issue. I found that I was trying to maybe swim 3-4 times a week. I found that, it's definitely a sport that the more time you spend doing it, the better, that you get the improvements through. You need to spend a lot of time doing it. Basically, the more kilometers you do a week, the better. But I just don't think that's very efficient. I definitely didn't. My all-round aerobic fitness was not getting fitter through doing 45 minute swims. Now, for you, if you've come from nothing, that 45 minute of aerobic exercise might be definitely helping you. But when I've come from doing 3-4 hour rides in the mountains in Spain, a 45 minute swim for me is going backwards, but it's almost taking as much time and energy in the day to go, to drive through West Midlands traffic, which is horrific, to get to the swimming pool, get changed, fight for lane space. You can't, by the time a session is broken down, you're in the pool for an hour and 10, hour and 20 to do an hour of swimming. It's just not super efficient. And your heart rate's not really high. If I did swim hard, for me, because I'm not a swimmer, I can only swim so hard before my arms drop off. If my arms drop off, I lose technique. I'd be just splashing, which is no good and isn't going to make me any better. So, you have to limit intensity a little bit to maintain technique, in which case aerobically it's offering me nothing. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's not aerobically not massively helping me, but it just felt like I was really busy trying to constantly fit these swims in. Like, that is time that could have been spent just chilling, relaxing, planning, doing work. And sometimes that then gives you the breathing space to maximize other bits of your sport. So yeah, for me personally, again, I like to talk in my own coaching about what's the limiting factor. For some people, getting into that swim might be super important. It might be that if, that is your make and break thing, in which case, yeah, go for it, get it done, hit it hard. But for me, that's not what's going to define a successful triathlon for me. If I lose 2 minutes or 3 minutes in the swim, it's like, I've quite frankly, I've been throwing that away in transitions by not spending enough time practicing my transitions, to be honest. So, it's not worth making my life super hectic to get that extra pool time. So for me personally, I've now chopped that down to kind of 2 sessions a week. I'm just doing them on my recovery days when I've got a bit more time. It's not as stressful, and I'm going to try and make them hard. I'm going to get the most out of them. I've got X amount of drills that I know I'm working on. I'm going to, I feel if I'm in there, I may as well, I'm still trying to improve when I'm in there the best I can. But yeah, twice a week, go in, get it done, get home and crack on with life, basically. I think you can just, the big learning I found was with triathlon was that I managed to make myself really busy. I felt like I was just super busy and super hectic last year, the last 2 years, and just wasn't necessarily getting the aerobic gains and improvements from that. So that's swimming. You got any questions on that before I don't want to just turn this into a big me giving a 1 hour monologue of my training.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. I definitely agree with what you're saying. I think that there's one, I guess, devil's advocate argument that I think is worth bringing up, and that's if you look at it from the perspective of 1 or 2 seasons, then yeah, you get very little return on swimming because, as you say, over an Ironman or whatever distance, the amount of time you need to spend swimming to improve even a little bit of time is just proportionally less valuable than if you spend that time cycling or running. I think the one caveat to that is that if you're looking at your entire triathlon career and you know that, okay, eventually I want to achieve something, maybe it's something that, okay, I want to qualify for Kona, and let's say you don't know, of course, what your, and I'm not talking about you, but about the general you. Yeah, if your genetic limitation, if you call it that, is similar to other Kona qualifiers in your age group on the bike and the run, but you're just quite a bit slower on the swim, you might come into a situation later on in your career where the swim is limiting you. So in that sense, if you're focusing a bit on the swim consistently throughout your triathlon career, then when you actually get to a point of needing to push the swim a bit, you're in a better position. But I definitely agree that in a short and medium term perspective, it does for sure offer by far the least return on investment, and in many cases it makes complete sense to do what you do. And I have many athletes that are in the same position, that where some athletes right now are swimming 0 times a week that I coach, and we're focusing on the bike and the run for similar reasons as you are. So I definitely agree, but I think there is an argument or a situation where you are happy for those swims. I can use myself as an example. I've had years when I've been swimming 5 times a week consistently, 20 kilometers a week with a squad, killing myself in the pool. And I know that those were mistakes as well, because I was just swimming too hard, taking too much energy from my bike and run, and not improving the bike and run as much as I could have otherwise. Getting into issues from that. But now I'm in a position where I'm actually swimming better than ever with 3 swims a week only. And that's probably, I probably couldn't swim the way I'm doing now if I hadn't put in all those kilometers in the pool for quite a few years with the squad and also on my own in the past. So from a long-term perspective, there can still be some value in doing those extra swims sometimes, but that again depends completely on what your goals are in the long term.
Yeah, as I tried to kind of caveat all this at the start, this is based on me and what I think my limiting factors are. And that's not necessarily what everyone else's limiting factors are. Again, if I was trying to be a pro, I mean, I think I'd probably have taken that out of the window now because of my swimming just seen. But, realistically, the words of one person I knew who's worked on his swim a lot was, you need to get out the front, because if you're not at the front, you've not got the motorbikes to help you. Like that was his view on it. And yeah, I mean, but for me, I can, if I knock 3 minutes off, the motorbikes are still going to be 3 minutes up the road. So it's, for me personally, that's what it is. But, I do think a lot of people can be, it's got to be purposeful. I think that's also the key. And I think I felt like I was busy by just getting there. And what I was doing was I was chasing volume, and I was just saying that because I felt busy and I didn't feel in a good headspace all the time. I just felt a bit like foggy almost times. I was like, look, just get in, get it done, and be happy that you've got, I've ticked off 10K a week, 12K a week. No matter what happens, if you just turn up, get there, do your lengths, that's your weekly goal done. And that gives you a nice bit of dopamine. You feel good and you feel proud of yourself. Yes, good, right. I've had a great week, but I have ticked off my swimming. And but for me, that wasn't the right approach, and it just didn't. I think it needs to be more purposeful. So, so although I say I'm not taking swimming super seriously, like one thing I am doing, and I think this has got value, is I've only been once so far, but I've booked a course, is I'm going to see this people in the endless pool basically once a month, once every 6 weeks or so, just so I do know that in that period of time that I am swimming, those 2 weeks, because I mentioned that I'm just doing drills and then cracking on getting a session done, I at least am working on something. I'm not just swimming for the sake of it. Like, it is like those drills will have a purpose. I have got something in my stroke that I need to improve. I'm going to work on that for 6 weeks, and it'll be that 2 or 3 cues. Like for me, it was basically when I breathe to the left, my right arm drops in the water. Simple as that. So I need to just literally hold that right hand out longer, and then get a kind of earlier catch. Like, simple as that. That's what I was trying. That's what my current kind of cue is that I'm trying to improve. So I think it's also really useful that you've got that when you are there. I just think too many people are just turning up and swimming and thinking that just swimming more for the sake of it is going to make you better. And again, if it's not purposeful and it's not got a reason, then I think it can be quite really inefficient. So yeah, that's swimming for me. Then yeah, cycling again. Now I'm coming at this from a former semi-pro elite cyclist, not from a normal person. And I'm lucky with some of the availability that I've got. I think for me, ultimately, like, it requires a lot of stimulus for me to improve that area. And I think ultimately I just was being almost lazy with it, and I wasn't pedaling my bike hard enough. I was kind of like, I was kind of going, look, I'm already good at cycling. That's not my limiting factor. So let's, the limiting factors for me are the run and the swim. Let's focus on them. Then my bike's really good. But for me, I think I needed that bike fitness to really underpin the full event that is, a 4-hour triathlon, or, going forward, a 9-hour triathlon, 8-hour triathlon. For me, I needed that energy system to be, that aerobic system to be, to be really pumped up by my ability in cycling. And I think ultimately I just wasn't spending enough time. I was either, when I was doing efforts, they weren't hard enough. I was being a bit lazy, and I was saying, I'll do LT1 work because that's my 70.3 pace, or I'd do 70.3 pace efforts. And I'd go out for maybe an hour and a half and do 2 30 minutes, 2 40 minutes at, for me, 260, 270 watts, and be like, like that. But for me, that was too easy. It just wasn't providing me enough stimulus. And then I probably wasn't doing enough long rides. So the way I've changed that now really is just like I'm good. Like, my background is cycling. It's what I'm good at. It's what I can get a lot out of myself doing. So the way I'm describing it is I've just gone back to pushing the pedals harder. Like, I've gone back to, when I'm doing efforts, I'm now back to pedaling properly. I'm doing efforts at 330 to 350 watts like I used to, and I'm making sure that I've got that ability to literally just push the pedals hard. It's not overcomplicating things. I'm not, I don't need to take that to that. I know that worked for me. I know that helped. I know that's what got my threshold up. Just instead, and then I think before I was, maybe because I was trying to be busy and I was trying to fit everything in, and I was trying to get, I'm going to make sure I'm back in time for swimming. I was doing things like 2 hour zone 2, which I think if you're a full-time athlete and, that's all, you've got loads of time and you just want to gradually plump your volume up in the day, then that's fine. Like, you might just need to do, some days you do a couple of hours, some days you fit 3 hours. For me, that just wasn't doing enough. That was not enough stimulus to make me better. And this is where I think you get bogged down with all these performance models and your 80-20 and your polarization. You've got to be applying enough stress and enough stimulus to create adaptation. And you've got to, that is the underlying thing of, like, forget all the models. That's the really basic GCSE principles of how do adaptation work. You apply stress or stimulus, and then your body adapts to that. Simple as that. I was not doing that. It doesn't matter if you're not doing, it doesn't matter if that's 80-20 or 90-10 or all high intensity or all threshold. If you are not giving yourself enough intensity or not enough stress that you're then improve, it doesn't matter what you're doing. And push come to shove, I just wasn't giving myself enough intensity and enough, or enough load, because that could have come through longer rides instead. One way or another, I wasn't giving myself enough on the bike, and thus enough overall to really improve, or to even just stay, to be honest, to even stay where I previously was. Like, I was aware that I might not be able to be as good on the bike as I used to be, but I think I was far too accepting of being quite a lot worse on the bike than I used to be. And I was just being, it's okay that I'm now weaker because I'm just a triathlete now. It's fine. I don't need to be able to do, I don't do the sprint work I used to do. I can't do 1700 watts in a sprint anymore, but like, I couldn't do any, to be honest. I just couldn't do anything. And when I was out in Spain this January, I was doing some December. I was doing some 20-minute efforts. Just I know kind of everyone look. It sounds very basic, 2 times 20 minutes or whatever. But I was looking. I hadn't done a 20-minute effort over 300 watts almost in the year, and that used to be that used to be like your bread and butter work. It's not complicated. It's not sexy. It sounds quite basic, to be honest, and sometimes it is. But at the same time, it does work. Like it's not. I just hadn't physically pressed hard enough. So I was spending all this energy being busy and getting to different sessions and trying to fit it all in, and being like, I've got that track session's hard, that swim's hard, that one bike's hard. So I'm roughly at 80. I'm a bit polarized. I've got a bit of that. Ultimately, I just was not trying hard enough in the sessions that matter. So now I'm being really simple with my cycling. I'm either going out and doing efforts, and like I used to, like in the good old days, I periodize it how I, in the way that I've kind of relatively always done it, except I won't go into anaerobic work. I won't go into crit work because obviously that's not necessary for triathlon, but, good threshold work, higher threshold work, kind of aerobic work, 5-8 minute efforts over and I will periodize that how I think is best for me over the next 6 months. I'm either doing that properly, doing a proper session, or I'm actually going to stick some proper volume in and not try and get back early for a swim, get back early for a run, worry about the other sessions that aren't doing anything. And I found that so much easier. So like yesterday I did, again, this isn't fancy, 55-minute session from my door, 5-minute warm-up, rode up a big hill that's by me that's 9 minutes hard, rode down another way, another 9 minutes hard up another way, and then did 30-30s for 14 minutes, but a third way up these hills. I'm really lucky I've got quite long hills literally on my doorstep, and then rode home, 55 minutes, done. Whereas before, I'd probably tried to do like an hour and a half kind of zone 2, and it just wasn't doing it for me. And so that's the silent thing of it. It's, again, sounds, I'm probably not giving too much help, but I think people can get bogged down in this.
So in terms of the
now,
in terms of your plan now, going forward in cycling, does that mean, will your volume of cycling be similar to what you did when you were trying to when you were doing what you describe now as a mistake, more zone 2 work, trying to fit a polarized or a certain model of intensity, or does the volume change? Do you do less frequent sessions, but then they are either hard or long? Can you elaborate on that?
It's probably going to work out about the same, if not maybe longer, but it's either going to, because it's giving me more energy to do it. So it's either an hour of smashy, like good fun, just get a good session in, push pedals hard, get a proper workout in, or it's actually like, good 4 hours. Whereas before it was just like 2s and 3s and, like 1.5s. And it was more frequent, but again, it felt like a battle getting them in. And then I just wasn't pushing hard enough in them, to be completely honest.
Right.
So now it's either, if I'm going long, I'm going long. So that doesn't mean German volume training 7-8 hours, because that's probably too much for me right now. I probably can't hack that. So it's, so basically, like Monday was efforts, Tuesday was efforts hard, Wednesday was long, Thursday was efforts hard, Sunday will be a kind of mixture of both. Whereas before, trying to ride, just trying to fit too much in all at once and trying to be busy. And it was just, like I say, it just felt like I was busy rather than really working on what I needed to work on. And again, this is off a different, I've got years of aerobic work already in me. That means that doing, I can probably hack this as well. Doing quite a lot of efforts a week is, might be too much for some people. But this is, so again, the context is, this is for me. But for me, just riding steadily too much, it just wasn't helping, because it just wasn't enough overload to improve.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else on the cycling, or do you want to move on to the run?
No, so I think the run one's going to be the more interesting one now. I don't think that cycling's rocket science. I just don't think that you need to obsess over this 80-20 periodized, like X person on Twitter says you exactly have to do this. For some people it works perfectly, for other people it doesn't. There's loads of debates out there with good sports scientists saying that they don't believe in it in the slightest. There's others that obviously swear by it and think it's the best thing ever. It's about what works for you. And for me, just too much of it was, I was just being like, look, I need to be consistent. And it just, to be honest, it was killing me trying to be consistent. And what I was doing was I was sacrificing quality and nuance to be consistent, because I was just getting out and getting it done, but without quality and without purpose and without meaning. It was just being done. So it looked like I'm doing loads of, to their models, it might look fantastic, but to me, it just wasn't doing it. So it's, for you, is what you are doing working for you? And if not, are there other approaches that may work differently? For now, switching this up has definitely seemed to help. Whether it helps in the long term, or I don't know, but this is the stream that I've walked into. So this is how I'm approaching the situation.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Right, running. So I found this very frustrating. Again, constant context of this is coming to this with a big aerobic base in the grand scheme of things. I was very fortunate that I got to ride my bike, as a kind of semi-pro cyclist for, a number of years, averaging 15 to 20, 25 hours a week, some weeks. I've got I'm coming at this from a very different perspective than probably what a lot of people listening to this are. So at the start, basically, it was really hard to not get injured. Just the first 6 weeks, to be honest, up to 3 months, to be honest, I was doing such a small amount of running. I was doing 3 5K sessions a week, and I felt like I was always nursing something. I didn't fully get injured, but I just had niggles and ankles, hips. honestly, I felt like our pavements have a little bit of a slant, so water drops off them. My ankles struggled with that so much. I'd got such a lack of instability. So yeah, first of all, it was super slow. And then the problem with that, and I think this is what's then gone on for a long way after that, was I then ran very soft. I used Nike Invincibles, Nike Reacts, etc. Super squidgy, real soft, real comfy shoes. And when I was running, the emphasis became not getting injured rather than trying to run faster. And again, like it's when you're doing this yourself, it's very easy to it depends on what mood you're in to interpret this, but when you have it again, because I wasn't in a great headspace all the time, I felt like I was sometimes a bit foggy last year because I was trying to do so much. I didn't always feel that I was really empowered with my own sport sometimes. It was just a case of I'd go out and get a run done. So as far as I was concerned, right, I've got an hour to do or whatever, it would be an hour at don't get injured pace rather than trying to really run faster, because I'd keep the heart rate would be where it needs to be. The heart rate is in zone 2, so I'm doing a nice zone 2 run. Aren't I clever sticking to scientific models that suggest everything should be zone 2, because zone 2 is amazing, like top scientist me for doing that and listening to what I preach. And then with that, I then just didn't bother. It almost didn't matter how slow I ran. I was like, speed doesn't matter. That's speed's for ego. Like, I just need to make sure I'm in the right heart rate, the right physiology, tick the right boxes. Fantastic. But I think with the problem with that, with not being held accountable to speed, is that then I basically just would run soft. Like, I literally just, I'm basically I could see in pictures, I was like, what am I doing wrong when I'm running? And I'm basically bending from the hip, from the knee a lot, from the ankle a lot. I'm probably like squidging down and like having a load of contact time. And basically I've just not really improved. And through trying to be clever with thinking I'm running in the right zones, I've just not really improved my run mechanics, which is that, the run economy, which is your tendons, your ligaments, and getting that spring. That's what you want. That's the most important factor as a runner. There's the kind of famous study with Paula Radcliffe where a VO2 max basically stays steady for like 7-10 years or whatever it is. But her economy is what improves every year, and that's what takes her from being a good young athlete. I think she was still junior or under 23 European cross country champion, but to being Paula Radcliffe, greatest female marathon runner ever, arguably. It was run economy, and that's obviously the thing that I've got fitness, so it's clearly run economy is my issue. And that's the thing that I just wasn't improving. It just clearly wasn't getting better. I just felt like a plodder, and I've just spent, to be honest, 2 years with far too much time plodding. Like I'm not complete. Like I wasn't completely daft. I've not just only done that. I've still done track sessions. I've still done other stuff, but just not enough. Just again, not enough stimulus. It was again the majority of it plodding, and then I'd do a track session. But that track session again, one, I couldn't push myself hard enough, and I was maybe trying to be too clever, and I was being Inga Britson runs his track sessions at LT2, so I should be running at LT2. So when everyone's smashing themselves in these track sessions, I was probably just holding that little bit back and just being like, no, don't, you see all these gurus and all these podcasts and all these things, training's not about, it's about being consistent. You shouldn't go too hard. And so I think, to be honest, I was being a bit soft. I just wasn't pushing myself enough in those sessions. I thought I was being clever. My splits would be super equal. But so like we do a track session, I'd be running I'd go at exactly 5k pace. Which is still pushing. It's in theory, it's probably still a bit fast for what some of the gurus prescribe. It should have been exactly threshold. It should have been even slower. But for that reason, I wasn't getting that run mechanics like how it should. Like that was what was limiting me, and that's what I should have targeted, and I didn't. I just kind of tried to be clever with the intent when I was doing intensity, and then spent the rest of it running slow. It's as simple as that, running slow. And again, I think this is where, for me, this might not be the same for everyone else. For me, that's where I've been wasting time. And I think this is where, again, some of these, Twitter gurus and stuff, I think are very one-dimensional with what they talk about and the way that they approach this. Because they're talking about, from a metabolic health perspective, all this time should be spent aerobically below LT1, etc., etc. But running's got a lot more, I mean, all sports got a lot more nuance to it, but running particularly has got a lot more nuance than just energy systems. It's got this whole mechanical system of, how's your technique? How is you spring? How springy are you? What are your tendons, ligaments doing? How does that change over the length of a run? And I think, to be honest, I was just missing that entire side of things by running too slow and too ploddy. That's relatively speaking. I understand it's, for some people it might not be considered ploddy, but for where I should have been for my aerobic level, too ploddy. And again, the problem is you listen to all this. The Kenyans do their slow run slow. Don't think you're better than the Kenyans. If they're doing their slow run slow, you should do your slow run slow. But they've been running for 20 years, and I've not been running for 20 years. So they've already built up these run mechanics, and they've already got that. And I've not. So I need to work on what I need to work on. I don't need to listen to what the Kenyans doing, because that's not me. So in the last 6 to 8 weeks, all I've done is just completely switched it up. I've just gone, right, I am doing. It's basically I'm basically calling it either not plodding sessions or mechanic sessions. So I'm either just, when I am doing steady runs are no longer that steady. They are typical runners sessions where like pure runners, like runners just go out and they just, they get a little bit ego and they just kind of run at tempo, to be honest. Like, so that's what I'm doing. I'm going out with a running club, or I'm just pressing on. So let's say previously I was running at 5 minute to 5 minute 30 kilometer per minutes per kilometer. I've just shifted that to like 420 to 440. So I'm just moving quicker. Simple as that. For me, that is the point. And this will change to different people's physiology and different mechanics. For me, that's the point at which I feel like I'm running. At 5:30, I feel like I'm kind of plodding along a little bit. Like, I understand for some people that's a good pace, but for me, with my physiology, with my physique, that just feels like I'm being a bit ploddy. I'm on the ground for too long. So I've just moved that to just literally, I'm just moving quicker. Like, the heart rate's still relatively controlled. I'm not now running it at 190 beats a minute. That's still roughly, it's still a pretty aerobic heart rate, but I'm just running quicker. It's as simple as that. When I'm going to run, I'm running quicker. And then the other half of it is I'm then running to improve my run mechanics. So it's either hill sprints or it's fast, like 200 meters, 300 meters on the track. And I'm literally just working on running faster, driving my knee, driving my glutes, and importantly, having that foot on the ground a lot shorter time, and really working that springy reaction part of my running. And so far, like, honestly, it feels absolutely night and day. I feel so much springier. I finally feel like I'm starting to like adapt as a runner. And I felt before, like in the without sounding disrespectful to anyone else that runs at this comparable level, I'm a kind of former kind of pro cyclist. I've got VO2 max in the 70s. I'm in semi decent shape. I don't look, and when I'm in 10Ks or cross country races, I'm around a lot of people that just did not look the same as me. Like, I was with, people that just weren't. I was clearly a bit of a different, like that. My physiology should be a little bit faster than those people I was with. The people that have only been running for 3 years. I'm running with, I think like last December I did a 41.5 minute 10K, which again for some people is great, and that's a great time for a lot of people. But it's not a great time if you've got a VO2 max in the 70s, if that makes sense. That's like really arrogant or I'm special, I should be doing amazing times. So clearly something was wrong. And yeah, I finally feel like I'm actually moving a bit more like a runner and feel just in sessions. And that's what we were kind of speaking about before. I've just done a session earlier, like an hour and a half ago. So I'm still in kit, which is a bit minging. But I will shower as soon as this is over. And yeah, I've just done some 1K reps, and I'm literally just moving 15 seconds per kilometer quicker in those for the same heart rate as before. I'm just shifting that bit quicker. And I think that for me, that's just like, I wish I'd have clocked into this earlier. Now, again, I'm going to refer to this all the way through. Everyone's coming into this from a different position. Like, if I'd done this when I started, I'd have been instantly injured. It'd have been a terrible approach. So this is also after 2 years of potentially what I'm calling my plodding, but without trying to sound too disrespectful to people when that might be a good pace for them. For me, my plodding, that's potentially built loads of robustness for me. And without that, I maybe wouldn't have been able to do this work now. So, it is, this is just the situation that I'm in right now. But I think the kind of learning is that I think people need to just work on what works for them and not just worry about. I have so many people messaging me now being like, "Oh, should I buy a lactate sensor? Should I buy this? Should I buy?" And it's like, well, why? Why would knowing your lactate make you faster? You're just collecting another bit of information. But if all my runs in the last 12 months had been to lactate, they'd have been the exact same. The paces wouldn't really have changed or improved. If anything, I want to slow down on them. So that would have, if anything, made me even worse. Like, so how is that helping? Like, what I needed to have done was identify that I knew my run economy was the thing that was letting me down. I wasn't daft. I was aware of it, and it was just that I was going through studies and saying what improves run economy, and I was maybe a bit. Hill reps was definitely on there, and I did do bits of it, but just didn't take it seriously enough. And then one of the other ones was run volume, and I was like, oh well, I'll do the run volume one because that fits in with triathlon and consistency. And again, it just meant that I spent a lot of time being busy. With another thing that I was trying to fit in all the time was trying to increase my run frequency and I was trying to run like most days of the week and stuff, but just like not a lot, just 15, 20, 25 minutes some days just to make sure I was running. And it just wasn't doing it for me. It just was not enough stimulus for my body to adapt. And that's what it's all coming back to. I think people are forgetting the initial principle of, if endurance adaptation is you need to make sure whatever you're doing, you're giving your body enough stress and then enough recovery. I'm not then neglecting that, enough stress, then enough recovery that you then adapt. And the whole point of the kind of, the polarized method, I'm picking on that one at the moment because that's obviously the one that's the buzzword and has been the buzzword for the last couple of years with all the Norwegian methods and stuff. The idea of that method is that you are limiting intensity so you can do more and more and more intensity. So maybe if I'd have been doing 30 hours a week with what I was doing before, maybe then I'd have had really good results. But because I couldn't do 30 hours a week, I could only do 15 hours a week. And I felt like I was running like circles around myself just to do those 15 hours because I wasn't suddenly used to finding swim time. That just was not enough intensity. That was not enough stimulus for me. So I've basically, the whole talk of this was I've just found trying to find the right balance of stimulus that works for you to improve you as an athlete. And like I say, this doesn't now mean I'm going to turn pro or become amazing. It just means I'm going to hopefully become better than I was before. And as with any athlete wants to do, that's all you're asking for. That's all I wanted last year. That's all I wanted the year before that. I just, my running just was not really improving. I was able to run a bit more without getting injured, but it was not improving. And that's all I wanted. I don't want to be running 30-minute 5Ks as much as I'd love to. I just want to be improving. And this has finally started to click. But for everyone, this will be different for what maybe that. It's not just looking for hacks or this magic little, everyone loves a hack and loves to do the shortcut. But for me, this maybe is a bit of a hack, and this one was the one that worked. But for you, it might not be. It's just this is my story.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many great points there. I think a running theme through that is something that we've talked about on the podcast before. Not necessarily you and I, but other guests have been on talking about this. That there is this trend, I think, with a large bias towards focusing on the metabolic side of training and performance and neglecting other sides of it. And one example of that is in cycling, focusing a whole lot on power, but not focusing on aerodynamics. Obviously, that is something that we have talked about. And the same goes in running with, as you say, economy. Probably if you put that 41 minute something 10K into something like the Jack Daniels VDOT tables, which are meant to be a bit of an estimate of your VO2 max, that would put you somewhere in the mid 50s for VO2 max, but you have in the 70s is your VO2 max actually. So that just shows that, okay, there's a huge running economy gap there, and part of that is just kind of, I guess, getting the tissue used to running, but then part of this is definitely how you choose to do your running with focusing on mechanics, as you say, and on not doing unnecessary plodding. And the same goes for swimming. Swimming is actually a great example of how maybe sometimes there is just a much too big an emphasis on the metabolic side of things, because a lot of swimmers get really, really fit and can swim get really high thresholds by doing very like a lot of what seems very strange if you look at it from a running or cycling perspective. Lots of short intervals, lots of pretty fast intervals, various strokes, various drills, and so on. And I've criticized that, and I still think that there is a good kind of mix that you can achieve. But it is certainly evidence that you don't need to go out and do continuous training at a certain lactate level to improve, especially in sports like swimming and running, which do have a huge mechanical and efficiency aspect to them, which is a bit different than cycling.
Yeah, I think that, I think, like I say, it's so the way that I'm, again, and it's different for different people depending on what your limiting factor is, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Like for me, so I'm kind of just changing this around. That like cycling for me is my fitness. That's what's going to make me fit. It's going to give me good MLS or good VO2 max or whatever it is, whatever aerobic fitness or you want to determine, you want to choose. I'm using cycling to do that because I can. Swimming then is about technique. And it's about technique to like under fatigue. So it's like, so first of all is the drills, like I say, I need to get better at swimming. And then to be honest, the reason that you're doing the efforts is, if any, like I say, isn't to get fit. I'm not going to become fitter because of doing like 2100s, it's 30 minutes of exercise. And I can't get my heart rate that high doing them anyway. So that's not going to make me fitter. So what that's doing is that's me trying to preserve the technique under load and under fatigue, and that's more, if anything, it's a fatigability session. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make sure my arms can uphold that technique when they're tired, which is what will happen at the end of a half or full distance Ironman swim, and then obviously make sure they're just not in pieces after. So again, with that, every now and then I'm going to do like I will every now and then do a long swim just to make sure that I can back that up. That's another way of just working on fatigability. I think I heard Sam Laidlow's dad was talking today about he likes the idea of just beating your arms up. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Again, you're not looking at doing it for metabolic. You're looking at doing it because you want your arm to be able to hold up in the last half of whatever swim you're doing, and you want to make sure your arms can then hold onto the bike after. That's the more important thing than just then trying to think like what's your heart rate while you're swimming, and then running again, just exactly looking at the other side of the picture. I'm using cycling to look at the fitness side of it. I'm not that bothered about running making me fit, and I think it's honestly been a really big relief because it's helped for everything. Because it was like another fun battle. Has been nutrition, and it's going to sound like some people might think they might hear this and be like, wow, he's a whopper, and some people might hear this and think this is really relatable. I found eating such a pain when I first started. Like, honestly, it was like being a beginner again when I just couldn't eat. I couldn't eat within 2 hours of running, or I got stitch. And I was like, oh God, I'm trying to be an elite athlete and I've got stitch after 5 minutes of running. I just felt like a beginner. And to be honest, I didn't really get much better at it. I actually got better at just learning what was the amount I could eat within and up to how long before a run. And I'd maybe improved that a little bit, but to be honest, it genuinely was, I couldn't drink anything within 40 minutes of running, and I couldn't eat anything within maybe 90 minutes of running. And the amount of times I'd then go out and blow on a run because I'd try not to eat, and then I'd have a call or a meeting or something pops up, and suddenly I've not eaten in 3 hours. I'm too scared to eat a top-up meal or a top-up bar, and I'd go out and I just see stars after 5 minutes because I've just not eaten. And so I found that really hard. But now I've taken the emphasis off. I don't care if I get stitch. If it's a bad run, it's a bad run. It doesn't matter. If I'm doing 10 200s, I can push through stitch for 30 seconds. That's not a problem. It's pretty hard after a full day of work to push through stitch for the 55 minutes of steady running. That's pretty unenjoyable. But 10 200s, I'll push through stitch for that. That's fine. So it's even allowed some freedom with that. So now I'm just eating more normally, drinking normally while doing these sessions, because if I get stitch, so what? Who cares? That's like, I'm no longer looking at it from a fitness perspective. Like, if I'm now looking at it from a completely different perspective, and it's even made then eating better. And now, obviously, because I have been eating gels just before I run, or like bars or whatever it is, that now I can manage it and now I can stomach it. So even that alone has been like such a nice little bit of freedom. And again, it's having realizing there's just so much more nuance to a lot of these sports that make them better. And again, a big part of, your Ironman will be your ability to fuel when running. And I bet so many people just don't ever take the risk when running. I didn't. If I had a long run, I was like, that's my only long run of the week. It's a really important session to me. I really want to make sure it's good. So I didn't want to take a gel because I didn't want the gel to ruin it. But now I'm like, I'm not that bothered because I'm keeping fit another way. So if it's a bit bad, it's a bit bad. Like, fine, who cares? Like, but that's then allowed the freedom to like work on this completely different aspect. And I'm sure, and I think for so many people that would make such a big difference. How good are you at, for all the improvements you can make elsewhere? There's probably a lot of people out there whose biggest improvements could probably be the ability to fuel when running. That would probably be, that for some people that would probably save 15, 20 minutes on an Ironman run. And you're not going to find that by doing anything else, by doing fartlek work for some people. So
could be 2 hours for
yeah,
some.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you completely hit the run, and you've got no glycogen left, then yeah, your ability to take it on, it could save you hours. I think people aren't prepared to look at the chain, these different approaches and these what else is making performance rather than just the metabolic, total volume, total time spent in zone, total time spent near certain threshold, etc. I think that they can become not seeing the forest through the woods, etc., or whatever the expression is.
Yeah. It was an interesting question that I started pondering the other day. Actually, was when I was sitting down and planning the training for one of my athletes, was because I think I was just giving them a threshold session or something, and then suddenly the thought popped into my head that how would I prescribe this session if I didn't have any understanding of conventional physiology? Like, we don't have things that are called thresholds and so on. Obviously, then you would go more traditional things like 5K pace, 10K pace, those sorts of things. In cycling, you don't necessarily have the same tradition of doing that necessarily. But anyway, that I think that can be a useful just thought experiment for people because you can easily get tricked into prescribing a session always based on calling it some physiological marker, and then you prescribe it according to what you think develops that physiological marker. But we don't necessarily know that it's as simple as that in how it works. Things interact beyond just the metabolic side and physiological side of things. So yeah.
I think that's the key. I think sometimes people use these additional measures and actually almost can make their training worse because we don't know. Like, honestly, like, everyone's getting hyped that you're going to have this constant lactate measurement device. Like, it's going to be the same as the glucose monitors, but for lactate. And everyone's been like, that'll be make or break. That's going to be the best thing that's ever going to exist. I would not take a single bit of advice from that for years. It's going to be a good couple of years before you go, does that actually make a difference? Like, because we can monitor it. You could do it, and you could start doing your. It's a bit of a basic session, but it can work. 2 times 20 minutes. We're going to stick with that for now. At the moment, people know roughly what they can do for that, and they know how to get a good session out of that, and they know roughly what power they'll do, and that will improve them for a few weeks in a certain time of year if done in the right place. Just solid enough session, push the pedals hard, it's fine. If you suddenly start going, oh, well, I'm now going to do that same session, but to 4 millimoles, we have no idea whether that's going to work or not. We've not got a clue. We do not know if that session is now a better session because you are doing 4 millimoles of lactate on that session. Like, it's obviously the Norwegians would suppose that they might do testing where at the end of the block they've already tested it sometime. For most people, if the sessions that work for you, and you suddenly stop doing that session that works for you and just start looking at a random lactate number, which it is random for now because we don't know. You do not know that works. There is not a single study out there showing that efforts at specifically 4 millimoles are better for training than efforts at 6 millimoles. We do not know that. That does not exist in literature. That does not exist anywhere. So we use this common sense idea that there's certain sessions that you've done before, or that pro coaches have done before, pro athletes done before, that seem to work. And you test it, you do it. Does it work for me? Yes or no? You should have come up with, for most people, they should have come up with conclusions by now of certain sessions that work for them. So the run I did this morning, 6x1K. Most people know that session is a good session to bring on some kind of aerobic threshold fitness for running. A lot of runners do that session a lot of the year. That's nothing fancy, nothing incredible. If you suddenly start doing that session and limiting yourself or even suddenly destroying yourself in it because you're now chasing this measure that we've got no idea how it correlates to performance. That would be ludicrous. So I honestly think people can become so obsessed with these different measures that they don't mean anything. Like, it should, like, from like my perspective is, if you're doing that session today, for example, like the session I did today, 6-1Ks, it should basically be, how hard can you do those efforts within the realms of, you've got to recover. You know, you can't be doing every session that you're dropping on the pavement after and being sick. Like, so you're not going that hard, but you're going hard enough that you've definitely, you know, that you should have that feeling that I've definitely got that good workout in. I've enjoyed it. I pushed myself. I tried to beat the numbers that I last did there. And, you know, you're not going so hard that, you know, I'm written off for tomorrow, I'm written off for Sunday, it's going to take me a week to recover from it. And you're just finding the balance between that. Like, that's the important thing. The numbers that are out there are just, you know, if that's 10K pace, 5K pace, if it's, you know, if you're using a stride and it's the power, or, you know, or if that's an equivalent cycling or swim session, like, the numbers that are there should just be they're just a prescription to give an idea of what you should be roughly targeting. It's more important for a beginner. Like, a complete beginner should be, you know, while it's really important for them to learn about RP and learn how a session should feel, for them, they potentially are shooting in the dark. They've got no idea how to pace a 4-minute effort. They've got no idea how to pace 6 of them specifically. So power, all these other things, speed can be quite, you know, pace can be quite useful for them. But if you're a well-trained athlete, you should know how to get a lot out of that session without needing pace. Pace is just that little bit of a carrot, that little bit of a reminder. That's the only way you should be treating it. Like, all I'm doing today is I'll just check on my watch every now and then that I've not either gone off too fast or I'm not getting lazy and backing off too much at any point. That's it. Like, the rest of it should be still done to feel. And yeah, using lactate going forwards to remove feel is the wrong approach, because RPE is still the measure that tells you what's going on above anything and everything else, because that's what's actually going on in your body. That's the best measure. How you feel is what's actually happening, because it's taking the full context of, are you tired? Have you got muscle damage? Have you got low glycogen? Are you too hot? Are you too cold? Have you got a cold? Have you got flu? Have you got COVID? Whatever it is, like, RP is the thing that tells you, not power, speed, or lactate. That's just an output.
Yeah, there's the additional complication with the potential of continuous lactate monitoring that I'm not super up to speed on everything, but from my understanding, at least, it measures in the interstitial fluid, rather like glucose monitoring, rather than capillary lactate, as we do with today's lactate meters. So that there is the potential that what we see as, for example, 4 millimoles right now might look like something different with those new monitors, because it's a different measurement essentially. So if you're not aware of that, then you might make pretty huge mistakes if you're trying to draw an equivalency between the two.
Yeah, like that we'd need to recalibrate that from, like, I do not know how lactate dynamics are different within intracellular compared to in blood. Like, that's a different part of, you know, science. Though I couldn't tell you what the answer should be and how that should be different. But from an applied sports scientist perspective, then yes, like, even to start with, we'd first have to recalibrate. What do we think threshold is? What do we think the threshold 1 is? What do we think threshold 2 is, for example? And then we'd have to basically go through all of our training again, just monitoring it, just seeing what's going on, and then we can start to look for trends and see if it actually starts to offer up useful information or not. But until we've done that and we've discovered, you know, first we need to see what it does, and that will take, you know, like I say, could take years of just seeing what, you know, how, like, what are your dynamics when it's being measured continually. Then you can start to say, well, actually, when we look at this, we can see that people don't start the first effort hard enough, they're too tired at the end of the last effort, or then they can start to say, right, we're going to now try this new approach where when we do 6-1Ks, we're going to do it to lactate now. We're going to see if that's better or not, and we're going to test. You do your first one really hard to make sure your lactate level get up, and then actually you're going to float your last few to make sure that it doesn't get too high. That could be the new approach. But you've got to test that and then see whether that works, because it could be a terrible way of doing it. That could be an absolutely awful way of doing it. We don't know yet. And that's the thing. So I think so many people will get this device and start just running with it before they can walk, if that makes sense. Like, this information is only useful once we've tested it and seen what the output is, rather than assuming that because you've got this new number that suddenly your training is better because you're measuring something else when you're doing the exact same session as before, or like I say, or doing a worse session than before, but now measuring something. Bigger picture is what's kind of more important and more nuanced than just metabolic outputs.
Yeah. A question on behalf of cyclists that might consider getting into triathlon then. So what aspects of your learnings from now getting back into triathlon, shall we say, do you think are perhaps more generally applicable to many other cyclists? Or what tips would you give to cyclists that might look to get into triathlon?
So keep the cycling up for longer. Don't just turn it off, which I probably did. I probably turned it off too much and too soon. Keep the cycling going until you can really, really replace the fitness from the cycling sessions with run sessions or swim sessions. Like I say, I almost don't think you can with swim sessions until you are an incredibly good swimmer. Like I just couldn't get, I can't get that much out of myself in an hour swimming because like my arms would fall off, my technique would go and I'd splash before I metabolically got to where I needed to go, if that makes sense. Like the equivalent of if the last hour of a 4-hour ride I can sit there at 230, 240 watts. That equivalent chunk of energy, like swimming, I just, my arms would fall off before I got to it, if that makes sense. Not that obviously energy would be different with different arms versus legs, etc. But if we assume the same kind of, what I'm getting at. And then the same with running. Like, again, I just really enjoyed the session I did then, just really good. I literally went out, warmed up, smashed the efforts, got back. It was 40, 45 minutes of running total. That does not replace a 3-hour ride. It was great. It's helped my running. Was really good. I'm really happy with it. I've got a good session in. Okay, but I'm using that, like I say, that's working on speed mechanics. It's not working on fitness. And what I was doing before was, I'd do a session like that in the morning maybe. I'd then do a swim on the evening. And then the next day, then I'll be like, oh, that was a hard day. I'll take a rest day the next day. And actually, realistically, that's when you've come from doing, good, solid training sessions, that's just not giving me enough stimulus. And that's where I went wrong. 45-minute run and a 45-minute swim does not replace a 3-hour bike. That sounds really obvious, but I was doing too much of that, especially in the early days when it was just a 35-minute, 45-minute plod running. And then, like I say, the swim, I was doing drills or something. Really, that should have been, I could have done that on a recovery day. So instead of that would have previously either been, a hard, long bike or efforts, it was actually more like a recovery session, to be completely honest. So I think, I think I basically took the gas off my cycling far too much at the start. And you can only, and I think you should only really start replacing good quality cycling when you can definitely get good quality running in return, because 30 minutes at zone 2 is just running. Just unfortunately, if you've come from the level I have, isn't that special. For some people that are starting out, that might be a great session. That's all you've got time for, and that might be a fantastic session. That's all you can do on a Thursday night. Brilliant, get it in, done. That's fine. But for me, no, that just wasn't enough stimulus. And like I say, I turned off the tap cycling wise. So quite frankly, lost fitness by doing that. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing is, running and swimming is just, again, I was too happy to use, because I was, like I say, I wasn't done with cycling, but I was, like a little bit annoyed with what COVID had done to me with cycling. I was happy for the change. So I was too happy to let running and swimming replace cycling as this aerobic stimulus, when realistically I should have just approached it differently. Like, swimming should have been about technique, running should have been about economy, and that should have been it. Like, that should have been the focus. Instead, I was too happy thinking that they were offering up aerobic stimulus. So I just, I kind of directly just swapped them out and just went and just accepted less total volume and just went, oh, well, I've swum and I've run today. That's fine. That's my aerobic stimulus for today. And it just wasn't enough stimulus. Simple as that. So, I might have done that on a Tuesday, then a Wednesday I might have, I'd cut my ride short because I've not got that much time because I'm also trying to fit a swim in. And then on a Thursday again, running a swim or something. And then, by Friday, I need a rest day. So it's just like I say, for me, it just wasn't enough stimulus. So running is definitely work on the mechanics, working on running fast, working on that's just important. And just, again, take some ego out in terms of don't need to look for big volume. Don't need to look for, if you need to walk, I'm right now, I'm really happy with the idea of if I'm running fast and then it's too much for me, I'll stop and walk and then I'll carry on running again. But what I'm going to make sure I do is run, not drop down to plodding, because that's just not helped. The plodding has not helped me. I can definitively show you my 10K times since I started to now, and they haven't improved. So very clearly that did not help. So there's no need to do it. So yeah, happy to just, when you are running, run quicker within reason. Now, like, this sounds like the opposite advice to what you hear from everyone else. It doesn't now mean every session now becomes a full gas Swift race, or like, every bike's now as hard as you can, if you swim as hard as you can, if you run as hard as you can, because I've now said the opposite of what people preach with polarized. It's just that to not overemphasize the polarized model maybe quite as much as what's needed, unless for you that's a limiting factor. For some people that might be what limits you. You might if you've come from football and you've been running, you've been sprinting everywhere for the last 8 years, your tendons are probably absolutely mega, you're probably super springy, so actually you probably do need to work on just your overall aerobic fitness, in which case long steady volume is probably really good for you. It just depends on how you're on where you've come from this. For me, the aerobic side was already there, so I needed to work on the other side. But if you've come from gymnastics, skipping, like something that involved being springy, then that mechanics may already be there. So you may need to work on the other side of the equation.
Yeah, and I think that it doesn't have to mean that you do a huge amount of it. Let's say if you are doing 3 runs a week, for as an example, with a general person, let's say you might just add some hill sprint, as you mentioned, but it doesn't have to be like that much as part of a general run, and then you do some faster, like moderately fast running, and some walk breaks maybe, and you could also do run with general strides. Every 5 minutes you do a stride, so I guess say an 8 to 10 second acceleration with good mechanics, focusing on that. So you can definitely combine it as well, even with, let's say, even with plodding, especially for people that are maybe not as resilient to injury, they might want to do that easier running, but it's still possible to get in frequent sprinkles on biomechanical work within that context as well, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like to give an idea, I think the smallest session I've done so far was before I flew home from Spain a couple of weeks ago, so I didn't have a lot of time. I ran about a K to warm up. I just kind of ran a K to warm up, and I think it was 10 8-second sprints up a hill, and the hill was literally like 300 meters from where we were staying. So I did the sprints up that hill and then basically walked back to the house. That was it. And even little things like that, I think, have really helped me. So it's also about doing the minimal dose to get an effective response as well. It doesn't need to be you suddenly go absolutely crazy with this either. So as you say, from a starting perspective, it can be throwing some strides in. It can be like, say, 8 to 10 second hill sprints. I mean, last night I did 15 second hill sprints. I wouldn't overcomplicate it, but just if that's the thing that you feel need to work on, then just I think just do it. I think is the other thing. Take a little bit. Again, there were points that I'd either been prescribed that by someone I was working with, or I kind of put that in myself, and I just not appreciated its benefit, and just hadn't always done it myself. Just, if I do the strides, it's going to ruin my, I was quite happy getting, plodding along sort of thing. Like I was enjoying it, and just, I don't want to ruin my run by doing strides. But I should have done basically that. Like that was what I needed to do, and that's what I should have done. Like sometimes take some ego out, and make your run shorter and just do what you need to do. But obviously on Strava, a run looks better if it's continuous and is a nice round number. So that's what you do. But no, like I say, if you do hill sprints and walk back down again, it's going to look awful on Strava. But that's what works for you. Remember, again, figuring out what's important and kind of targeting that within your own model of performance.
Yep. And do you think that are there any common misconceptions in the world of cycling about triathlon in general, or triathlon training?
It's definitely harder in terms of to do it all. When I was in Spain in basically December, I go out there I need sun as much as anything because the UK is so bleak in December. So I pretty much went back to I kind of went back to knowing what works for me. So I kind of went back to what does a normal December cycling block look like? And I just sprinkled that small amount of running and swimming in rather than trying to think as a triathlete anymore. I just went back to thinking like a cyclist, just to kind of get my legs back. Because I'd not had a good previous couple of months. I was busy. I went on a few camps with athletes I worked with and things like that. So I needed to just get back into it. So I was like, look, this is how I know how to get back into it best. So let's go for what I know works. So I went back to cycling training. God, it was so much easier. It was so much easier to just go out. Literally, like we'd wake up at 9, 9:30, go out at 10, 10:30, get 3-4 hours in, have a calf stop, come back, and you just got so much energy still because you're not worried about that second session. That in comparison to doing the Brownlee camps out there that I've done in the last few Februaries working with Johnny, I've tried to join them for a few of the early morning swims. Obviously not done the same set as the Brownlees and Richard Varga for very obvious reasons, but I've been in the pool at the same time. God, they killed me. It takes so much out of you, like losing sleep to get that swim in. And then you just feel on edge thinking, I've now got a bike to do, I've now got a run to do, I've got to plan my nutrition around that. Instead, honestly, cycling is easier. It's a lot from a managing life perspective, because that's a big part of it. It's not just the training, it's the managing, keeping the bike in good shape, keeping it clean, waxing your chain, making sure your bottles are done, good nutrition. That became so much easier to do when I was just focusing on cycling again. And actually, I think probably cyclists wouldn't respect how hard it is for triathletes just to train, just to do a week for triathlon. You are just being busy. And like I say, and I think that's where you need to just make sure that if you are being busy, that it's purposeful. Because I say what I did last year was I was just busy. My training wasn't purposeful. It was just like it was. I felt like I had rationales for doing stuff, but they just clearly weren't quite right for me. But realistically, I was just busy. And I think with everything else you've gotten in life, family, wife, dogs, kids, work. It's make sure if you are going to be doing a lot, you've got to be so well organized. And it's definitely not a sport if you're not a well organized person. And I just don't. I think cyclists would definitely find that a shock, because realistically, we're quite good at being lazy. Just I thought, like, honestly, you wouldn't. I'd never have thought that people doing 4-hour rides were lazy, but compared to triathletes, you are, because it is just 10 minutes to get ready, 20 minutes to get ready before, 20 minutes to get done after done. Whereas you have that same 20 minutes to get ready when you're doing 3 sessions a day. You can spend an extra 2 hours of getting ready a day, an extra hour and a half of getting ready a day. That just takes energy. So I'd say it's a higher mental and total energy requirement to get the same gain in triathlon as it is in cycling.
And what would you say if you have the opposite scenario, a triathlete that wants to go into cycling? Maybe for those reasons it's too stressful to do triathlon. What would be your tips for how they maybe need to change their approach to the sport, considering the differences between cycling and triathlon?
If you're this is, I'll be honest, I've not really seen much of this ever, but let's say you were going to become a racer, then the biggest thing would be learning to race, the technical elements, because the triathletes be fit enough. The fitness of professional triathletes on the bike is perfectly adequate. Like that's not, again, that wouldn't be their limiting factor. Again, plenty of pro triathletes are training 15 hours, 20, like some of them doing 20 hours a week on the bike still anyway, so they're already doing the same hours as some professional cyclists. So the aerobic fitness isn't a problem. To be honest, the thresholds are probably not far off. It's the ability to I'd say generate torque. So potentially, whether it's like, for them, probably big gear, big gear work's probably likely important, and then just bunch dynamics, riding at high speed. So things like motor pacing would be vital. Just it's all well and good being able to do 350 watts, 380 watts, 400 watts for some of the absolute weapons out there, while sat at a constant speed with on your ergo, giving you resistance or up a climb. There's another thing altogether doing that at 55k an hour when you're on the wheels and this micro accelerating. And and yeah, I'd say it's the complete switch in dynamics like that. Again, this is again one reason why I would struggle. That's what I was good at in cycling. I wasn't just a big aerobic beast. I was good at the finesse side of cycling. I was good at positioning. I was good at changing the speed. I was good at accelerating when I needed to, being close on the wheel, generating power in technical high speed elements. That's what I was good at, and obviously none of that translates to triathlon. None of that's it doesn't help me really. So I've kind of taken my weakness within cycling and tried to apply it to triathlon from a raw physiology point of view. But yes, that would be the most important thing for them. I suppose for someone that's just moving to just do it casually, there probably wouldn't be like a lot to change. I'd say just. I don't know what you change at all. I think you'd find it easier to just be just a cyclist for those reasons that I said. You'd be a lot less busy. You can then put more effort into, organising everything else in life that goes around sport and making sure that you're organised in that sense. And yeah, I'd say just making sure if you don't want to be more serious, I'd say the ability to generate higher power is probably more important. Not just from a energy perspective in terms of like creating anaerobic power, but being able to access it when tired and things like that. Because this is if you just say what's a harder sport, so like I say, I'm happy to say triathlon's a harder sport to do the training for. But what I like about cycling, what makes cycling such a hard sport is it's the expression of, if you're fighting a bear, you don't stop when you're tired, you stop when the bear's tired. That's what makes cycling hard, because unless you are Pogacar or Vingegaard taking the race on, which very few people are, it's about riding well and far above what you are capable of riding and just hoping that at some point it slows down before you blow up, which is really hard. But that's the fun bit for me. I love that you are just, you are riding at such an unsustainable pace, and it's just, in a crosswind or something, and you are just being like, I really hope it slows down. But because obviously you can't, you're sat there at 550 watts in the gutter, you cannot go any faster. It's gonna have to slow down, or you're going in the broom wagon basically. I think that's good fun, but I imagine that's something that triathletes wouldn't have the ability to access that really that from a kind of neuromuscular perspective, and even probably have some of those energy systems. So yeah, I think it would be a case of lots of over-unders, if you're going to do the threshold with loads of spikes, with loads of higher intensity, make sure you can really access that higher power. And then obviously working hugely on the technical elements of riding at speed. It's something it's something I've told everyone to do in terms of with a triathlon perspective anyway, is make sure you're riding your time trial bike at speed, not just slogging on the turbo. It is important to have that speed, but obviously for road racing be even more so. You have to, it's about going fast, not just about going powerfully. And learning the nuance and the art of going fast without power, which is being close on a wheel, is micro accelerations, etc., etc.
Yeah, we're running low on time, so let's take just 2 sentences for a few short questions. So that's my challenge for you to answer this one in 2 sentences. First, what are your thoughts on strength training within triathlon?
It's so hard to fit in if you're super busy. I definitely think that you should be doing it, especially if you're an aging athlete or a weaker athlete in the nicest sense of the word. But it's so hard to fit in. Again, I've got to say, it's limiting factors. For me, I'm 80 kilos, was a sprinter, I'm strong. That's not an issue for me. If you are a small, petite, elderly athlete, then strength is potentially a much bigger limiter for you, in which case that may be what you need to target.
Yep. And bike fit for triathlon versus for time trials in road cycling?
There shouldn't be a huge difference. It should be a minimal difference. You have to work to deserve your aero position. It's not just a case of your current level. You have to work for it. You have to spend a lot of time in it. It's not a fluke that some people are aero and some people aren't. I don't like the idea of I can't get aero, I've got to run after. I think that's a pile of so and so. Yes, you can't be the extremist position, but I think you can be pretty close if you put the hard work into really spend time in position and really work on what's needed to get into that aero position and respect it.
The balance of training in the TT position versus on the road bike or other bikes for triathletes?
just the nuance of where you are, what's available. If you are in Dubai, then great, ride your time trial bike every single ride if I were you. But in other places around the world, it's just not appropriate. So it's maybe a case of can you get more out of your training by being on a road bike potentially. In some cases, that you may get more just because you can train better because you're not scared of being hit by cars, or haven't got inappropriate gearing. But yes, most triathletes should be using their time trial bike more than what they currently are. Very few ride it enough.
Indoor bike training
can be a useful tool, as discussed, depending on where you live, but people become over-reliant on it, and you do massively miss out on the ability to ride fast in the real world, because in the real world, it is not about riding powerfully, it's about riding fast. You do not learn to ride fast or develop the skill to ride fast outdoors by riding turbo. You are simply just working on an area of physiology. So yeah, I think a lot of people miss out on skills and speed by being too obsessed with a power number indoors, and we're better sacrificing some numbers indoors for a suboptimal outdoor section of road where you actually get faster at riding your bike.
Great. You did a great job with all of those questions to keep them short. So if you want to take a little bit longer with this final one, feel free. Running off the bike, so doing brick runs in training.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't want to preach things that I've not got a load of experience in. As I say, because of where I've been, I definitely saw that as an icing on the cake thing, and my cake was very, very undercooked and really was not ready. So I decided not to focus on that bit of icing on the cake in that respect. I didn't do it. I was too worried about injury risk. So personally, I did not do a lot of it. I don't overly prescribe lots of it to the athletes that I work with. Bits and bobs is not very scientific way of saying it. Making sure you can produce the mechanics when needed, but I'm not over reliant on it as a coach. But I've not got, from a personal perspective, I wouldn't want to offer up personal experience that I've not really got or really worked on.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So thank you. That was all my questions. Really enjoyed this chat, and it was very very informational. Tell the listeners, where can they follow you and find you and your coaching?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Twitter on just Jacob Tipper. If you want to see me moan about stuff on Twitter or moan about UK politics, I will be on there, slagging off our government. And then my coaching account and Instagram is just Jacob Tipper Performance Coaching. I can't say I'm the most active on them anymore, so probably just follow myself or just reach out to me on LinkedIn or anything if you want to just get in touch. But yeah, I'll be honest, I don't overly press. If you want resources, people to follow, I'm probably more entertainment than I am in terms of scientific things to be following on there. I keep it kind of quite personal rather than there's probably better people if you want pure sports science, just for reference.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Hope to do it again another time. Really enjoyed this one. So see you next time.
Yeah, no, great to talk to you. See you soon. Bye.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview. As always, you can find the show notes on scientifictriathlon.com with links to Jacob's website, Twitter, Instagram, and also the previous episodes that I've done with him, episode 344 and 345. 344 was all about the sub-7, sub-8 project, where Jacob was the team captain for Joe Skipper's team and put together the team of cyclists and pacers helping him. And episode 345 was more going into his own coaching methodology and approach to coaching. And I remember that episode fondly. It was a very good discussion, pretty long one, I think, but very well worth a listen. I also want to expand a little bit on this interview here today and what I personally think are some of the main take-home messages from the interview of today. Firstly, as Jacob said, but it bears repeating, it is not that he's saying or that we're saying that the training he was doing is bad and what he's doing now is good. It's more that it turned out that the training he was doing was maybe not good for him, at least not at that moment in time, because he wasn't improving. So that is the measurement stick, really. For many others, what he's doing now might be bad, and what he did would have been good. But the message is to be engaged in your own training process, and if you're not progressing, then analyze why that might be and make changes accordingly. It's simple as that. It's not to say that any type of training is better or worse. That's not the point of the interview. Secondly, I think that what Jacob talked about regarding letting his bike go and that being a mistake is an important one to consider as well. In general terms, it's a bit of a question of how do you balance your resources between strengths and weaknesses. And what Jacob did is basically what I think is very natural to do, and that is to shift a lot of focus onto your weaknesses. In hindsight, in his case, it turned out to not work out so well. And honestly, this is a mistake that I made as a coach several times. It is a very tough one to get right, I think. But I do think that the tendency for a lot of people, including myself, clearly, is that we are very motivated to, quote unquote, fix our weaknesses. So much so that we forget to assess the negative consequences or potential negative consequences of too much of a shift towards working on weaknesses rather than strengths. Of course, the more short-term our outlook is, the more it might make sense to just quickly plaster over the most egregious weaknesses, and you won't have time to suffer negative consequences from de-emphasizing your strengths. But on the other hand, the more long-term the outlook, the more you'll benefit from finding the right balance and definitely not letting go of your strengths, keeping your strengths. So you probably shouldn't de-emphasize them that as much. And as Jacob talked about in his case, letting go of cycling too easily, too readily, basically was the recipe for him to maybe lose general aerobic fitness, because that was the one sport where he could really create a strong aerobic stimulus to maintain or improve his aerobic fitness. And finally, I think it's worth repeating what we already said, that it's important if you're an athlete or a coach to not get too physiology biased, because there's a lot more to performance than just physiology, including biomechanics, as we discussed in relation to Jacob's running, and as well as psychology, which while we didn't directly address it in the interview, you could argue that it was present throughout. For example, that discussion around feeling like you're stressing from one workout to another with an excessive amount of, let's call it a FAF to training ratio, that is going to have a psychological cost that could impact adaptation to training. As an athlete, that's something that I've most definitely felt myself at times. So the point is not that physiology is unimportant, because of course it is hugely important, but that there are many other factors that are also hugely important. So we need to be holistic in our approach to the sport and not get too one-dimensional. If this sounds like a lot of thinking and planning that you need to engage in when it's hard enough to just fit in the training, then that's where good coaching can make all of the difference. One of the main attributes of a good coach is that they start with the athlete and then plan the training from the athlete. They are not married to any given training concept that they try to shoehorn the athlete into, but they have a toolbox with a lot of different options to choose from that they can apply and try to find the right tool for the right athlete and the right situation. If you've been stuck in a rut, or you just have big goals that you're working towards and want to give yourself the best chance of achieving them, then a good coach will make sure that you approach your training holistically, not getting too one-dimensional and stagnating as a result. So if you're interested in this type of coaching, then do check out our coaching options on scientifictriathlon.com, where we have a lot of information about how our coaching works and about all of our coaches. And you can contact me directly if you want more information or to set up a free discovery call. We also have ready-made training plans as a great option if you're on a tighter budget and coaching is not an option. Ready-made plans can never achieve the same rate or magnitude of development as working directly with a coach, but for a large amount of athletes that still have a lot of improvements to make, the structure and consistency you get when you invest in a good training plan is often all that's needed to make pretty massive improvements. How big these improvements are depend mostly on how fast you are to start with, to be honest, and how suboptimal you might have been training. But it's not uncommon for me to get emails from training plan users that have improved their Ironman PB by up to 2 hours, or their half Ironman PB by up to 1 hour or so. No matter what your level is, you will always improve the most with a good coach, but a good training plan is for a lot of people much, much better than designing their own training plan or picking up a free training plan from Google or ChatGPT or something like that. So simply based on budget, it is for a large amount of people a very, very good option. And you can learn more about our training plans on scientifictriathlon.com. In the next episode of the podcast, I interview coach scientist James Sprague, or now Dr. James Sprague. He has been on the show before when he was just starting his PhD work, actually, and now he has completed it. So we'll talk about cycling, training and coaching, critical power, because a lot of his research has been based around critical power and so on. If you want to, you can look up James in advance and send in, if you have any questions to him, you can send them in to me and I will see if I include some listener questions in the episode. You can find him on ResearchGate, on Instagram perhaps, Twitter. So check him out, and if you have questions, just send them to me on michael@scientifictriathlon.com. Finally, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Fuel and Hydration, that you can find on precisionfuelandhydration.com. If you're looking for high quality, practical and tasty fueling and hydration products, make sure that you try Precision Fuel and Hydration. There are a range of options from drink mix to gels to choose, so you can easily find your personal favorite. And don't forget to take 15% off your first order with the code TTS24. And thank you to Zen8. The Zen8 Swim Trainer is a great tool to have in your toolbox to improve your technique and power, to target specific aspects of your stroke, and to maintain consistency when you don't have time to get to the pool. You can try the Zen8 risk-free for up to 30 days and get 20% off your first order on zen8swimtrainer.com/TTS. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.